Okay. We are holding on Mamish the bottom, the last two lines on page Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph 93a. So let me just bring up the Gemorahs over here. Okay. So we're learning about Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and we learned about last week. We learned about uh, uh, the difference between Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and there was the other two false prophets that try to involve themselves with the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar threw them as well into the furnace with Yehoshua Kohen Gadol. Yehoshua Kohen Gadol, his clothing get burnt, and that's because his children were marrying inappropriate women. Whereas Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, nothing, the smoke, nothing, they weren't touched and bothered by the fire in any what way. So, hey Ariel, we're on the bottom page, Tzadik Gimel, Amid Aleph, 93a, on the bottom last two lines. Okay. So, Amar Rab Tanchum, we're again of the Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, that they were thrown into the fire. Hey Barbara, they were thrown into the fire, whereas nothing happened to them, but in the case of the other false prophets, they were burnt, and Yeshua Kohen Gadol was his clothing were burnt. So on that note, the Gemara continues. Amar Rab Tanchum says the following: Darish bar kapara b'tzipori. Bar kapara said in the city of Tzipori, which is in the north. What does it mean? This is talking about Ruth and Naomi, Ruth and Boaz, right? So our mother Ruth, which is the ancestor of King David and others, as we're going to see, she goes to collect from Boaz, which was the Mishpacha family, as well as also the leader of and related some way or another to Naomi. She was going to go collect for the poor people, collect from for the grains that are left, or the corner peya lekach, all the matnas aniyim, the gifts we're supposed to give to the poor in the field. So it says sheish hasa'orim ha'eli. So these 6 barleys, nasanli, this is what he gave me. So the question is, the whole verse is 17. It says, that Boaz gives Ruth 6 barley and says, don't go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. Now the Gemara analyzes, what does it mean 6 barleys? So what are these 6 barleys? That he literally gave her 6 kernels of barley, which is outrageous to say that's what he would give her. That's nothing, right? Doesn't make sense that Boaz would give such a gift. So Rashi says why. But Tanan, we learned, Rashi says that one doesn't give less than a half kav of barley to as a gift to the poor. And let's just bring up. I brought up the shiurim to see exactly the measurements of everything. So the akav is the equivalent of 24 eggs, which is 4 lugim, and what that is in today's measurement would be, according to Chaim No, would be 1.4 liters, and according to the Chazon Ish, it would be 2.4 liters, and according to the Rambam, it would be 1.2 liters. So if you have to give a chatzi kav, which would be 12 eggs, which would be 0.7 liters. It's obviously not the amount of, or 0.7 liters or 1.2 liters, depending on the shiurim of the Chazon Ish or Reb Chaim Na, whatever it is, it's not 6 barleys, right? So that's a very cheap gift. So, and although the Torah doesn't say specifically how much you should give, the Torah says a person should not give less than a chatzi kav. So the Gemara says, we're turning now to page Tzadik Gimel Amid Beis 93:2. Ella, so the Gemara answers, Sheish Sa'in. He gave the measurement of 6 sa. Now, what is 6 sa? 6 sa is 6 kavim. So 1 sa is 6 kavim. That's a tremendous amount. So 6 kavim is, we said 24 eggs is a kav, or 1.2 liters or 2.4 liters. And 1 sa is 6 kavim, which is 8.3 liters times 6, which is a huge amount. So the Gemara says which the number 6 is either it's 6 barleys or 6 which is 6 Could a woman carry so much? I mean, we're talking about you would be talking about, let's say in according to Reb Chaim Na, you'd be talking about close to 50 liters of the measurement of barley. That doesn't make sense. So would a woman carry so much? So Rashi says, an interesting Rashi. Rashi says, why can we answer other measurements? We could have said 6 kabin or 6 lugim, which are smaller amounts. So it says that because it doesn't, it says, Rashi answers because the lemaisi begoin mida b'chusa misa. We don't measure less than a saw in the Goran. Even though Rashi said before we don't measure less than a chatzikav. The Masha asks this question and he answers it, but the Kitzur, the Gemara wants to learn that either it means 6 barleys or it means 6 which is 50 something liters of weight of barley. So that's also too much. So what does the pasuk mean then? So it means that he didn't give it to her as a food. He gave it to her as a simon. So the Gemara says, "Ala remez la," he gave her a hint. That he, besides whatever she took, he wanted to give her back to go to her mother-in-law. So he says, don't go back empty-handed. What does it mean empty-handed? So now the Gemara says a whole new meaning. It wasn't about the food so much. It was more about that her mother-in-law should know that Ruth's commitment to her meant something. And that means that her commitment was that she's going to have Shasidin Shisha Banim Letzis Mimanu. She's going to have 6 descendants, sons that are going to come from her. That are going to be blessed with 6 blessings. Now, who are the 6 children that are going to come from Ruth? That are later she ends up becoming. She marries Boaz and has Boaz's son, and from Boaz's son comes Yishai, and then becomes David. So who are they? So Elohein, David, King David, is a descendant we all know from Ruth, and each one of them are blessed with 6 blessings, as the Gemara is going to teach us in a second. Mashiach. So the Gemara goes straight from David to Mashiach. So the Mashiach is Mashiach ben David. So Mashiach is the descendant of David. Also, he is blessed with 6 blessings and a descendant of Ruth. Daniel, the visionary Daniel, who we learned about last week, and who is in the court of Nebuchadnezzar. Some say he was also in the court of Achashverosh and Belshazzar. He was a court Jew, the first court Jew, and of course a descendant of David. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and then he counts also Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. So if you have David, Mashiach, Daniel, and Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, who we're learning about. That's why we bring this Gemara, because we're learning about Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Okay. So what is so Rashi says, Remezla, he says the hint was the Sheish Gar Nasan Simen Veremez Shasidin Lases Sheish Banim Imena, that she's going to have 6 great children from her. Okay, so what are the verses that where do we see that each one of these 6 children are going to be blessed with 6 blessings, are going to have 6 blessings? So he says like that, David, how do we know that David was blessed with 6 blessings? It means we know that these are the descendants. We're going to see there is one opinion that doesn't agree that the Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were from David, were from Yehuda. But according to this Gemara, so the Gemara is not challenging how do we know that they were from Ruth, but how we know they were blessed with 6 blessings. David Dechsiv, it says like this about King David. It says, I'm going to read the pasuk. The pasuk is like this. The pasuk is talking about when King Saul is looking for someone to lift his spirits. So Doeg the Edomite comes and he tries to push David as a candidate, seemingly, doing David a favor, and also hey Shuki. So we're in page Sadik Imam Beis. The Gemara we're talking about is the Ruth was blessed with 6, was given by Boaz 6 kernels of barley to symbolize that there's going to be 6 descendants from her that are going to each one be blessed with 6 blessings, and these are David, Mashiach, Daniel, and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So now we're learning, how do we know that each one of them were blessed with 6 blessings? So David, it says, the pasuk again talking about Saul is feeling down, and they want to find someone to lift his spirits. Doeg the Edomite, which was a big enemy of David, he presents himself as a friend. He's presenting David as a candidate to be the one to help him. But he's really trying to do is to create friction between David and Saul. So what does he say? Vayan echad mi'anorim. I'm going to read the pasuk in its full. The one of the young people, we're going to learn later how do we know that this was Doeg. V'yomer says, Hine re'isi ben li'ishai. I see that Yishai, meaning King David, Yishai's father David, has a son, David. Beis halachmi from Beit Lechem. Yedei nagin v'gibor chayil. He seemingly knows how to sing. He's strong. Ish macham, a war person. V'novin dover. He's wise. He knows novin from the word bina. He understands. So the Gemara is going to break down each one of them. Ish tar. He's a person seemingly of good looks. V'Hashem ima, and God is with him. So here he's presenting David as the candidate. Now, from the Gemara says, we learned from the Mefarshim show that each one of these, the Gemara is going to say in a second that each one of these things were negative. But let's first see the understand the positive. He says, so the whole pasuk he says is, so we have here 6 things. What are the 6 things? Yedei Nagin is 1. He knows how to sing. Gibor Chayil is 2. He's strong. Ish Macham, a person of war, not the same thing as a strong person, is 3. And then Nav and Davar, wise, they're smart. Ish Toar, it's good looks. Hashem Imo, God is with him. So these are the 6 qualities that he's blessed with. So he says, like Rashi says, Hainu Sheish Brachas. These are the 6 blessings. So Omer Rav Yehuda says, Omer Rav in the name of Rav. Kol HaPasuk Hazeh Lo Yomer Doeg. Again, now we're realizing that who is this young person? It was Doeg. The Gemara is going to show us later how we know it was Doeg. Doeg later ends up becoming the person who kills the whole city of Nov, right? When David is hiding in Nov, we learned that he was that wicked person who killed the whole city of Kohanim. So Rabbi Yehuda Rav says, Kol HaPasuk Hazeh Lo Yomer Doeg El B'Lashon Hara. Everything he meant in a bad way, Lashon Hara, in an evil tongue. Yedei Nagin. So what do you mean by Yedei Nagin? That he knows how to sing. Not that he knows how to sing, but Yedei Lishol. He knows how to ask good questions in Torah. The interesting things what we're going to see from here is that 2 of David's greatest enemies from the lower ranks, let's say not King Saul, etc., was Doeg the Edomite and Achitophel. Both of them were giants in Torah. Doeg was we see that what was what he was looking to install the Jewish people on a different level those days. It wasn't like he didn't say he's richer than you. It didn't say he's stronger than you, even though seemingly that's what he said. When you see how the Gemara really translates, it's all about Torah. It's all about God. It means within Torah itself, he was installing jealousy and hate, because that's what mattered in those days. That was David had a base medrash, had a base medrash. Shaul had a base medrash. The quality, what made a person in those days, in the days of the David, Shaul, and Solomon, wasn't how wealthy you were, or how the best job you had, but how you knew how to learn Torah. So each one of those things, he was trying to create jealousy in David's ability in Torah. So he says, like he says, Yedei Nagin, he knows how to sing. What does that mean? Yedei Lishol. He knows how to. She knows how to ask questions. I've said Rashi before. Rashi says, later we're going to see that when it says one of the young people, it meant that was Doeg. And Rashi also continues, El B'Lashon Hara. He didn't mean it as a positive. He was saying negative about David. He didn't just want, he wanted those days that the jealousy of Torah was so strong that he would kill him. So he wanted that Shaul would be jealous of David's ability in Torah, go and kill him. So he says, what is the first thing he says? Yedei Lishol, he knows how to ask. Gibor, what does it mean he's strong? He knows how to answer an answer of a question. It means he's good in the base medrash. Ish Melchama, what does it mean a person of battle? He knows how to argue in the arguments of Torah. So first is he knows how to ask. Second is he knows how to answer properly. Third is he knows how to pilpul in Torah. Ishtar Shemar Panim B'Halacha. What does it mean? Ishtar means that he shows. Rashi says Shemar Panim B'Halacha means Shmei V'Rayil Dvar. He doesn't just say a statement. If he says something, he brings proof, which is one of the basis of teaching. Is that just not to say something as an idea? But what's the backing to this idea? Well, V'Novin Davar. What does it mean? V'Novin Davar. Shemevin Davar Mitoich Davar. He has an ability to understand the depth of Torah from to read basically between the lines. What's Davar Mitoich Davar? Hearing something is not just to hear everything and be fed him. He knows how to dissect information and draw further information from that. Again, a quality in learning. This Mishael was the killer. That he said that what does it mean Hashem Imai? that halacha kamoise b'chol makom, that God is always with him. The halacha is like him. Now you have to understand an amazing thing that later in David's life when he's king, this is all before he's king. Later when he's king, and he's and he does certain things that are wrong, right? The story of Bathsheba and all that. So when did Achitophel think that he could start an uprising against him? He thought that there's no longer Hashem Imoy. In that quality, that Hashem Imoy, that Doeg said about him, and Doeg is testifying that David HaMelech, the halacha is always like him. But at the end of the day, when there's an argument in the Beis Medrash, David's always right. The halacha is like him in every situation. So this is the qualities that he says. That's what it says. He says, how do we know? Rabbi Yehuda Marav says, okay, one of the things, quality is Mar Parmel Torah, that he has to show a raya. So what's the raya? What's the proof of what Rabbi Yehuda Marav is saying? Maybe he was just talking about the good qualities of David. How do we know that it was all negative? So he says, he brings down like this. The Marsha says, the proof that he meant Lashon Hara, because he didn't respond to what the question was. Meaning to say, they weren't looking for they didn't ask for a scholar or a person who's battles in the Beis Medrash Shemimoy. They asked her a simple question: could you find someone who knows how to play a kinnor or a harp? That was a simple question. I mean, anyone was quality to play to play the harp. And he says he knows how to sing, it doesn't say he knows how to sing with a kinnor. So right away, the fact that he omitted the word kinnor meant he was trying to use this opportunity to present David, who did know how to play, obviously, the kinnor. We know David was musical, but and he had a kinnor, the famous kinnor that he had. But nevertheless, that's not what he said. He doesn't mention the word kinnor. And therefore, he says it doesn't mean he knows how to play the music, but he knows how to ask the question in Torah. The Marsha continues, he adds other qualities of David. Also, they never asked him if he knows how to learn, or if he knows how to answer questions, if he understands davar mitoich davar, or if he brings raya, or especially if Hashem imoy in halacha. Why is it nechshav lashon hara? And why is that lashon hara? So he says like this: it's brought down a famous Gemorah about Basra. Someone who overemphasizes someone else's qualities. Why are you doing that? Why are you telling the whole world about how great this next person is? It comes as a negative, because he brings the riff, other places that explain this, but basically that he was saying things that he was looking to install hate from Saul on King David. Just he says other things. What does it mean in day and nagid? She knows how to ask. What is so the Ben Yehuda says what does it mean? He knows how to ask something. What's the quality of knowing how to ask something? So the Ben Yehuda says that a question of a wise person is a half answer. It means a smart person. The question itself is knowledge. It says Giber Shidei Lahashiv. He knows how to answer. A person has to know how to answer a question. He says why. The Ben Yehuda says sometimes a person answers long, elaborated answers, and it confuses the listener. And you lose the sweetness of the answer. A person who knows an answer straight and direct, that's itself a quality, not to confuse people and actually give over people information. So answering a question also takes a talent. So he brings okay. So what did Saul answer to this kind of he was provoking him? So Amr he said to them, to Doeg and those who were listening, he says, Yehonasan b'ni kamayu. He took it personally. He said, Yehonasan, my son, is just like him. He also has all these qualities. He knows how to learn, he knows how to ask, he knows how to answer. He brings proof to his questions. Once he said, but God is with him in every time, that the halacha is like David. Not only did Yehonasan didn't have it, but even Shaul didn't have that quality. And he became jealous of David. And that's when he realized that the halacha is like David in every time, and not like Saul. So then he became jealous of David. How do we know that Shaul with halacha was not like Shaul? Because it says, wherever he turns is Yarshia, is trouble, or from the word Russia, is negative. And by David it says, he's always successful in every way he goes, meaning to say, Hashem is with him, he has atzlacha. So here we see that, and that's where he got jealous. I'm just going to see Rashi says, what does it mean that that Shaul didn't have the quality of the halacha? Like the halacha wasn't like him, the law wasn't like him. It means that at the end of the day, when they at the end of the argument, when they wanted to say what is the ruling was not like Saul. Why didn't he have that quality? The Gemara tells us in Eruvin about David and Shaul. It says that David, the Gali Masechta, David before he gave a shir. This is an interesting thing. And it's a very telling Gemara about people. The Gemara in Eruvin says that David, before he gave a shir, he would give over Masechta. He would tell them what he's giving a shir in. He would let the students prepare. He would be the Gali Masechta. He would let them know what topic he's going to talk about so they could prepare, and then he would give the shir so they could enjoy the shir better. Therefore, it says that the people see and they take joy because they understand the topic. But Shaul didn't tell them. He would come in and unannounced sources, right? The source sheet people give out today, a source sheet. He wouldn't give a source sheet. He wouldn't tell them what he's going to teach. Therefore, it says, therefore, everything he turned was negative because he wanted to have an advantage over people. He didn't want people to have that information. So therefore, the halacha was not like him. I was trying to say, he brings that over here. He says the proof that the halacha wasn't like Yehonasan, because David and Yehonasan would argue a lot. So if the halacha was always like David, obviously the halacha wasn't like Yehonasan. And he says, he brings out, some people say that it was a positive pasuk about Shaul. Okay, so he says like this. Now the Gemara continues. Minolan de Doeg have. How do we know that this was Doeg? It says Echad Hana'arim, one of the young people. How do we know that young person was Doeg? It could have been any one of the young people that hung out by King Saul. It says over here in this pasuk, Vayan Echad Minarim, that when Saul was looking for someone to play the harp, then one of the young boys got up to say, Miyuchat Shebin Harim. Says Mihan Harim, so it means not just any one of the young people, but one of the unique boys. And there's another verse that says about Doeg. It says V'sham ish me'avdei Shaul b'yemahu netzer l'fnei Hashem u'shmoi Doeg hadomi aber hara'ayim asher l'Shaul. It says of the Shmuel that there was a person from the servants of Saul that was netzer l'fnei Hashem. We'll see what that means in a second. And his name was Doeg the Edomite. That he was from the shepherds to Saul. So he says that it brings that over here. What does that mean? So Rashi says Netzer of Hashem Lumotei Rahaba, that Doeg learned a lot of Torah. He was like Netzer. He was gathered in to learn a lot of Torah. Avir haroyim asher l'Shaul alma hu miyuchat sheben arim. From here we see that Avir haroyim, from the greater of the son of the young people, Tanu Doeg the chazinin hachet the kari Avir haroyim. We see this called Avir haroyim, which is a title of respect, and therefore we see that he was the same person who suggested David, and he was a great study, a person who studied himself. So again, we see an amazing thing that again those days what made a person was a person who studied Torah. Okay, so here we see clearly that David was blessed with 6 things. So even though he was saying it negative, it doesn't change the fact that it was true. And if it was true, so we see that was Boaz gave 1 kernel of barley for David, and that barley was for the 6 blessings that were going to come from David. Now, Mashiach, how do we know Mashiach has 6 qualities, so to say, blessings? This is the famous verse about, we say in the prophecy of Yeshaya about the Mashiach, V'nachal of Ruach Hashem, Ruach Chachma, Bina, Ruach Eitz Gvura, Ruach Das V'yiras Hashem. Right, so there's going to rest upon the Mashiach, the Ruach, the Spirit of God, the Spirit of wisdom, of understanding, the Spirit of advice, of Eitzah, and strength. Ruach Gvura v'Ruach Das V'yiras Hashem. He's going to have fear of God. So he says like this, and it says that he's going to have a smell of fear of God. What does this mean? So first of all, Rashi brings down V'nochal of Ruach Hashem. Eze Ruach, what spirit? It's going to be a Ruach of Chachma, Bina, Eitza, Gvura, Ruach Das, V'yas Hashem. Those are 6 things. And therefore, that it's the 6 blessings that we have with Mashiach as well. So Mashiach is also blessed with 6 things. So he says like this, Ve'reicha b'yiras Hashem, the Gemorah continues, that he's going to have a smell of fear of God. What does that mean? He's going to have the smell of fear of God. Omar Rabbi Achsandre. Rabbi Achsandre says like this, Melamed she'etinu mitzvos v'yisurim. It's that he's going to be strong in mitzvos and he's going to suffer a lot. Yisurim is suffering. That the Mashiach is going to suffer a lot. We know it's one of the things about Mashiach is like it says, he suffers, he sits with the Mitzarim, the people that have tzaras, the people that are afflicted with leprosy. He's a leper. He's called a Mitzayra. Mashiach goes through a lot of suffering. He suffers for the Jewish people. Kirachayim, like going through a millstone. So what is that? What like Rashi brings down? Shetinu b'mitzvos v'yisurim kirachayim. V'hainu v'richa lashon rachayim. So there, the idea is v'haricha doesn't mean smell, but from the word rachayim, he's going to be grounded in mitzvos and in pain. And then he continues. Rava says, "Demoirach v'dain." He's going to be able to smell and judge. It's a famous quality that we say about the Mashiach. The Mashiach is going to have the quality of judgment by smell. We'll see in a second what that means. Because the pasuk says he's not going to judge from what he sees, and the pasuk continues. Just read the whole pasuk. It says, and not from what he hears, but he's going to judge from the smell. He's going to judge, and he's going to judge with a tzedek in a justice way. And he's going to have exact translation of this verse. So he says, so he says like this, he's with the righteous shall he judge the poor and decide equity for the meek of the earth. So he's going to give each person, even if they're weak, he's going to find the right answer for everyone in his way of judgment. So I just want to read the Rashi, and then there's some mefarshim on this, on the idea that he's going to be marach v'dain, that Mashiach is going to have the quality of judging by smell. It says Rava Omar, "My ve'richa demarach v'dain," he's going to have a smell. So Rashi says that shemerich ba'adam, he's going to be able to smell v'shayfet v'yedea mi'achayev. What's the truth? He's going to be able to know the story by smell. Shenemer loy lemar einav yishbait v'loy lishma yozen yerchiach v'afilo hachi v'shafet b'tzedek dalim kigoyin aidei harcha. He's going to know from the smell, like you smell something, you know the truth. The person says the fish is fresh, right? But if it smells rotten, then it's rotten. Nothing you can do about it. So the Mashiach is not going to have to hear information, but he's just going to know it automatically by the smell. And Chassidus, it explains the idea of marach v'dain means that he's going to have the quality of seeing the whole story, what the back end story, right? A person goes through a story, person gets judged, and you say, what happened to this person? Mashiach is not going to just know what happened to this person. Mashiach is going to know why it happened to this person. Like, what's the backstory? How did the person get to such a situation? So he just brings down the Mefarshim over here. He says, another explanation is that that he's going to have beruach hakodesh amiti. This is the Maharsha, I think, says he's going to have true ruach hakodesh. He's not going to judge from what people say, not even from witnesses. He's going to know for sure who's true, who's just, and who's right and who's wrong. Now the Gemara says something. He brings down the Mishael also that says that that even though that a dayan could only judge from what he sees, it says there still could be mistakes, even if a judge can make a mistake. That's possible. Maybe someone's lying. Maybe the witnesses are lying. It says, "Al Mashiach there's be no mistakes by Mashiach. He's been able to smell and judge. He said like this: with the smell, you could see the truth. And smell is stronger to identify the truth than what you see and what you hear. As it says, smell is a more spiritual sense from the soul, like it says, that the neshama from the breath from the smell, you could have, that goes into the neshama. Okay. So the Gemara continues. The Gemara says, it's a famous Gemara. The Gemara says, Bar Kuziva, seemingly Bar Kuziva is Bar Kochva, the famous Bar Kochva that rebelled against the Romans after the destruction of the temple about 70 years. So Bar Kochva lived about 70 years. That's officially the fall of Beitar. From Rashi, something seems a bit strange, but let's just say what the Gemara says. Bar Koziva Melech Tartin. It says he was a king that ruled Tartin Shnin 2 years of Palga, 2.5 years. So for 2.5 years, Bar Koziva was a king. Amr Luhul Rabbanan. There's another Gemara that discusses why is his name Bar Kochva, why is his name Bar Koziva, based on this Gemara. The Gemara says, Amr Rabbanan, I know Mashiach. He told the Rabbanan, he told the rabbis, I'm Mashiach. Amr Lei, he said, B'Mashiach t'chsiv d'marach v'doin, like Rava says, he has the power to smell and judge. Nechsen anan I marach v'doin, let's test you. Can you judge by the sense of smell? Even the chizinu d'lei marach v'doin, he didn't have that quality. He didn't possess the quality of to smell and to judge. Katluhu, this says they killed him. Now, Bar Kochva wasn't killed by the rabbis; he was killed by the Romans. Bar Kochva wasn't. Maybe they killed him, meaning that the protection of the Rabbanim weren't there. But Rashi says something interesting. Rashi says about Bar Kochva. The actual Rashi says Bar Koziva im mamlache Hordis haya. He was one of the kings of Hordis. He wasn't one of the kings of Hordis. Bar Kochva, the kings of Hordis would be Agrippas, the first, the second. Hordis was the last 100 so years of the second temple. Bar Kochva, the story of Bar Kochva of Beitar is 70 years after the destruction, nothing to do with Hordis. So in the Rashi itself, there's a little ches, which is the Mesuras Hashas. And it says it's a printing mistake. It's supposed to be Achrei Malchei Hordis, that he wasn't one of the kings of Hordis, but he was after the kings of Hordis because it calls him a king. The last kings we know that the Jewish people had was the kings of Hordis. So the Rashi says he was after the kings of Hordis, but that was well after the destruction of the temple. So it says they killed him. I'm just going to say a few ideas about the killing him and the story about Kochva. It says over here. First of all, the Rambam doesn't agree with this. The Rambam doesn't agree that they killed him. The Rambam says that they never tested him. He says we find that Rabbi Kiva also thought that the Bar Kochva was Mashiach. He said Derech Kolchem Yaakov, which is one of the verses we have about the Mashiach. So the Rabbi Kiva said that's Bar Kochva. And as he brings down, the Rambam writes in Laws of Malachim, chapter 11, law 3, it says, Rashi, the Rambam says, they never asked Bar Kochva to show a miracle. Only when he was killed, then they knew he wasn't the Mashiach. And the Ravid says, what do you mean? The Gemara clearly says they did ask him. But we don't know that they killed him. That's also something that's a little interesting. Of the Gemara doesn't show that Bar Kochva, again, it could mean that the protection of the Rabbanim weren't there. It's brought down that there's a story brought down the Medrash or the Gemara. I think it says in the story of Bar Kochva that Bar Kochva had an uncle that was always davening for Bar Kochva's success, even though Bar Kochva kind of did things that he shouldn't have been victorious. But this uncle or cousin was davening for him, and there was a spy from within the Romans that was in there, and he told the Romans basically that there's no way you're going to kill him until you get rid of this rabbi from davening. So this person set up this rabbi to make off as if that the rabbi himself was part of the spies and part of the team against Bar Kochva, and he presented some sort of scene that Bar Kochva got suspicious and he killed his cousin or his uncle. And once he killed him, so then the Romans were able to kill him. It says later a snake killed him at the end. Okay, let's just go a little further. Then Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. How do we know? Okay, so we know Mashiach, David, and Mashiach and David. What about the Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, that they had 6 blessings? It says about them, Asher ein bohem kol ma'us, v'toy v'mar, they had nothing wrong with them, they were complete. V'toy v'mar, they had good look, maskilim b'kol chachma, they were wise in all understandings, v'yedei das, and they had das, and mevini madi, and they understood things. V'asher koyach behem lamid b'hechel hamelech, u'lelamid sefer v'loshen kazdim. So they were able to stand in the king's palace. We'll learn what all that means. And to learn languages. So they had all these qualities, again, that Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, also descendants of Ruth, had 6 qualities like David Mashiach had. What does it mean they had no blemishes. Reb Chama bar Chanina, Reb Chama the Chanina says, "Afilu krivda de ksulsa lo yihava behu." They didn't have even like scratches that were done from those days. A person would have applied to them blood suckings to heal, so that would cause a little bit of a scar. They didn't even have those scars, so they were mamish complete. What does it mean that they were able to get all the qualities are smart? So obviously they were smart. What does it mean that they're able to stand in the king's chambers? What would that mean? So Reb Chama bar Reb Chanina, so Reb Chana, the son of Chanina, said, they pained themselves to stand respectively in the king's presence. They didn't talk any idle talk or laughter in front of the king. They behaved properly. Uminashina, they didn't sleep, which is obviously not easy. Even if they needed to go to the restroom to relieve themselves, they held it in, so they shouldn't present themselves as being casual and familiar in front of the king. Like it says, because of the malchus, and Nebuchadnezzar noticed that about them and saw that as a quality about their being. And it says also, Yehuda, and they were from the sons of Yehuda, meaning they're from the descendants of David. And he says, Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Kulu b'nei Yehuda. It means to say that all of them were descendants of Yehuda, meaning David. Okay. So he says, and he continues. He says, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nechemya Daniel b'nei Yehuda, Hanan, Mishael, Azariah, Mishar Shvatim. He doesn't agree. He says only Daniel was from Yehuda, but Hanan, Mishael, Azariah were from the other tribes. Like it says, so there's another verse that says about them, from the sons that are from within you, that they're going to be born, they're going to be sarisim in the chamber of the king. My sarisim, what does it mean sarisim? Sarisim can mean many things. So Rava says sarisim mamish, that they were castrated. That was a normal thing to castrate young boys in those days to keep them from having children. Reb Chanina Omar Shinisrasra Vaydazar B'Yameim, that because they were thrown in and survived the fire, so they castrated the idea of idol worship. So the Gemara continues to go a little further. So that's not a contradiction. The very fact that it says that they castrated Avodah Zarah means to say that that's not a contradiction to what we said before, that they didn't have any wounds. What does it mean that I didn't see any chavalim? Chaval means wounds on them. So chavala de nahara means, again, this was Nebuchadnezzar saying that he didn't see any wounds on them when they were in the fire. So he says, we're talking about there was no burns, but they were castrated. No, it's not a contradiction. It says, it says another verse that there was no smoke of fire on them. So what means that there was no wounds? It means to say they were complete. So it says, that they weren't affected not by the fire, not by the smoke, but other damages they had, which was that they were castrated. So he says, so now I understand, according to the opinion that says that Avodah Zarah was, so to say, stopped in those days, idol worship. This is what it means, that God said in the prophecy, that talking about the Sarisim who cut off Avodah Zarah, who keep my mitzvahs of Shabbos, as a positive. The ones who want to say that they were actually castrated. Why would God in the prophecy say something negative that they were castrated? That's not a nice thing. But so the Gemara says, they had both. They both were castrated, and they both also stopped Avodah Zarah. And that's what Hashem was referring to. And the other opinion is only Avodah Zarah. But so it says, if you're trying to say that you were mamish castrated, this is what it means. There's another verse that says that being part of God's entourage, so to say, is better than having sons and daughters, because they couldn't have sons and daughters because they were castrated. But it means to say that they weren't castrated, but only that Avodah Zarah stopped in their days. What does it mean better than sons and daughters? No, it said they can't have sons and daughters. So Reb Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, they had sons, but they died, and so therefore God was consoling them to say that they were tzaddikim because they kept their mitzvahs. So that was better than having sons and daughters, even though they were able to have sons and daughters, but they died. Okay, let's stop over here. Let's see if there's any Rashis we want to bring down. I mean, basically, just to go over, it says that just to put through the final verdict was that according to the opinion that says that only Daniel was from Yehuda, that opinion doesn't hold what we said before, that there were 6 descendants from Ruth. Each one was blessed with 6 things, so that therefore it's not a contradiction. The idea that they were there's a lot of commentary goes into that when they presented to the king, it says they had no wounds. So how could it be if they're castrated? They obviously had a wound. So it says no. When they were presented, they had no wounds. Then he castrated them. So then obviously that's not a contradiction to that verse. And what the Gemara basically concludes is that 2 things. One idea is that they called them Sarisim as a positive, because according to all opinions, Avodah Zarah stopped in their day. So that's a positive. Also, according to one opinion, they were actually castrated. According to the second opinion, they were not castrated. Rashi says you can't say both opinions hold that they were both, because then there's no argument. Also, the final idea is that when it brings down again that God is saying that their service of Hashem is and their righteousness is better than having children, similar to what Akana says to Shmuel, is again because either they had children already, so therefore they were able to have children, but they died. So as a consoling of that situation, God says that being from God's people, so to say, is greater than having sons and daughters. And according to the opinion that they were castrated, that they couldn't have sons and daughters. Okay, and that's so basically the conclusion of all this is that where was these prophecies said? Some of the prophecies were said by Yeshaya Navi much before by to Chizkiyahu. So Chizkiyahu was 100 so years before the destruction of the first temple, but he was read the very prophecy about the Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah what's going to happen to them when they go to Bavel, and so. We went a little fast at the end, but we're going to continue with basically the Gemara is going to continue to teach us about Daniel and Ezra and Nechemya, and the differences between them. All right, any questions or?
I don't have any questions. How would that affect service? I mean, when they would castrate these young males, would that affect their service in the temple?
First of all, they weren't Kohanim, they weren't priests. They would have definitely had they been priests, it would have affected, but they weren't in the temple. They were taken as captives to Bevel. They were in service of the king, not the Jewish king, the king of Babylon. So
Okay.
that was a kind of a thing they did in those days as a way of making, keeping them in service and shouldn't have other interest, was by castrating them, and so then they had nothing else to do basically but to serve the king.
Okay. And I really liked finding out about the barley corn that Boaz gave to Ruth, because that's never made sense to me. Why, you just give 6 barley corns? That makes no sense. But when you explain it like this, it makes more sense. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care.
Leila Tov.